Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today, I was going to talk about the birth chart for Bangkok/Thailand. This talk is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. So, yeah, let's take a look here. Just a bit of orientation and announcements. First, auto dubbing is now available on this channel in 8 languages. They're listed here. All my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concepts playlist. You can find all the teaching videos there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means I have a teaching video on that topic if you'd like to learn more. And my videos, I'm pretty good at organizing them into playlists so that different videos are easy to find. So, this video would be in my world places playlist, but there are others as well, like planets, grahas, houses, bhavas, that sort of thing. And for more famous birth charts like this, I would check out my birth chart archive list 2025 video. I list all the famous birth charts of people, places, and moments in time, and the videos you can find them in. Some of the last few videos I posted in case you missed any: June solstice, next 6 months, Dakshinayana, planet transits, your go chart for July 2025, birth chart for the 14th Dalai Lama in succession, Capricorn constellation or Makara rashi, and then the new moon or Amavasya for 24th July 2025. Then if you're new to all this and want to learn more about Vedic astrology, then the videos I've listed at the bottom of the slide are the ones I would start with to get a really solid foundation so you could start learning, or at least get more info, get more out of talks like this. Okay, so why the astrology of Bangkok and Thailand? Why did I go down this rabbit hole? Well, I first started looking at the astrology of Thailand a little bit back in March of 2025 because there was a 7.7 earthquake. Epicenter was in Myanmar, so its neighbor, but it actually was a strong enough earthquake that it shifted some things around in the capital of Bangkok, in Thailand as well. If you want to see that chart, I actually analyzed it, and it's in my planetary transits go chart for April 2025 video, if you want to check out that earthquake video. When I was looking into the astrology of Thailand and Myanmar and Bangkok, what I found out was that actually Thailand has a very strong history of an interest in astrology, and their astrology is apparently a unique blend of Chinese astrology, Indian astrology, and local beliefs as well. So I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. And then I found out, like, during the reign of King Prasatong, I believe it is, he was around his reign was 1630 to 1656 in the Ayutthaya kingdom. Apparently, there was a renowned astrologer named Fra Horachibodi who served as a royal astrologer. So the leadership of Thailand has used astrology quite a bit for a very long time. And then during the reign of King Rama IV, who reigned from 1804 to 1868, he apparently had a really strong interest in astronomy and even calculated total solar eclipse like 2 years before that eclipse happened. So yeah, I mean, there's again, deep interest there. And so when I was looking at Thailand and Bangkok, actually they're kind of the same because the national birth chart of Thailand is based on the founding of Bangkok, because that was a major turning point and really developed a real strong self-identity at that point as an independent nation, because a lot of the local areas were kind of independently run or administrated and that sort of thing. And so the time at which Bangkok became the current capital um, is the time of the horoscope for both Bangkok and Thailand. And it is currently not only the capital, but the largest city. So yeah, so apparently there's city pillars are put into the center of different Thai cities, and I think they're called Lak Muang. Hopefully my pronunciation is sort of close. And what these city pillars are is they're believed to shrine and house the Chow Pho Lak Muang, which is a city spirit or deity. Okay, so I was like, wow, that's pretty deep. And apparently, King Rama I erected the first city pillar when he moved the capital of Thailand to Bangkok. Okay. And the shrine was the first building in this new capital. And he set up the pillar about 2 weeks after he started his reign. So it was one of the first things he did, probably not only because he was interested in astrology, but just to like establish himself in the minds of the people. Bangkok being the center and capital of Thailand, and then himself as the leader. So these city pillars are built from Shayakpak, which is acacia, the acacia tree, which translates as tree of victory. Okay. So again, there's like all this sort of like deep sacred kind of knowledge and spirituality involved in this. And then inside the city pillar was placed a horoscope for Bangkok. Okay. The exact time for the horoscope for Bangkok/Thailand is the 21st of April, 1782, 6:45 a.m. Okay, according to Wikipedia. So I was curious. I couldn't find out. I don't know for sure, but I was trying to see if this was the time at which the city pillar was put in place, as like a time marker, or was it actually calculated by astrologers at that time? In the fashion of like Vedic astrology, which apparently Vedic astrology informed Thai astrology to some extent. To what extent I don't know, but in Vedic astrology, there's a branch called muhurta, which is casting a chart for the beginning of an auspicious event. Okay. To as much as possible try to align the event with positive alignment of stars and planets and all this sort of thing. So I don't know if it was a chosen date or just a time marker, but either way, I thought it was interesting. And I do have a playlist on muhurta, or auspicious timing, also known as the electional astrology. And one of the videos in that list, if you're interested in this kind of thing about like leadership specifically and astrology, I have a video titled Time for New Leadership, where I go into some of the considerations that are used in Vedic astrology to help support, positive outcomes with leadership and choosing new leaders. Okay. The other reason why, so you can see there's a lot of kind of interesting stuff historically here. The other thing is that actually, when I was looking at these charts of Bangkok and Thailand, they have current the sky pattern for these charts is very similar to right now. So, and that's probably why at least Thailand has been in the news more so lately than it usually is, at least in the U.S. news. I thought, I was interested. I went down that rabbit hole, and I thought you guys might be interested as well. So let's take a look. Okay, so here's the birth chart I mentioned for Bangkok/Thailand. Again, they're considered to be the same by mundane astrologers. Again, mundane astrology is like geopolitical. Another name for it is geopolitical astrology. So this is a chart for 21st April, 1782, 6:45 a.m. in Bangkok, Thailand. Okay. And, usually when I go through these things, what I do is I kind of get some context for the chart and then go through starting at the lugna or the ascendant, rising sign, first house, all different names for the same thing. And then I go into the different houses to see what we can see. Okay. So that's how it'll go. So if you're new to my channel. So anyway, just to orient you first, this is a North Indian style chart. And again, I'm using North Indian style, or not North, but ancient Indian astrology. As far as I know, I don't know how much Chinese astrology influence or other things are going on. So this is probably more of a classical model. And so again, I was just curious to see, like, based on again the astrology I'm trained in, what I would expect to come from these charts that I'll be showing you. Okay. So this is a North Indian style chart, the top diamond in the middle with the little one in the bottom corner. This is the ascendant, rising sign, first house, or lugna. Lugna is a Sanskrit name. So the lugna is important because it sets the tone for the rest of the chart. For a person, this demonstrates the physicality as well as the personality of somebody on a general basis. Okay, kind of like the first kind of thought or glance people have of others. You could think about it that way. Okay, and then to get to the other houses, you count counterclockwise or up and to the left here. So that upside in the upper left corner, that upside down triangle with a little 2 in the bottom corner, that's the second house with Mars in it. Okay, and these little numbers in the corner, they don't. It is the first house, like the one in the lugna here, little one in the lugna here. It is the first house, but that one actually designates the constellation that's in that house. So the first constellation of the zodiac is Aries. So what we have here is an Aries rising chart, or a Mesha Lugna in Sanskrit. Okay. So the day lord of this particular time here is the sun, and the Ra lord is Venus. So that's already pretty interesting because we have sun right here at the top of the chart. And the sun is in Aries where it's exalted. The sun represents things like the king, presidents, leadership, that sort of thing, and it's exalted. So already we have a very strong leadership, model going on here. Okay. And then the Hera Lord or Hour Lord is Venus. So Venus is exalted as well. However, Venus is in the 12th house here. 12th house indicates things like losses, expenditures, and also things like remote places and international trade. Okay. Venus as a planet represents things like luxury goods and items, women, as well as romance and social grace, diplomacy, that sort of thing. So already what I would gather is that there's very strong leadership here, which again, this was the beginning of a whole new kind of a dynasty, really, or period of time for Thailand in developing its self-identity. So not only does the sun, exalted sun in the Lugna here, give very strong leadership and identity to both the leader, King Rama I, and the country, but then we have this Venus in the 12th house here, exalted, establishing itself as an international trade place of international trade, strong international trade. And also Venus, one of the things about, especially Bangkok, Thailand generally, but Bangkok specifically, is it's known as being like a place for rest and relaxation, even from like the world wars. Like American GIs would go to Thailand to relax, while they were on tour, their military tour in Asia. And, Bangkok, Thailand is also known for um, the sex trade, frankly. So we're seeing that here already in this Bangkok chart. Okay, so international luxury items, and that's part of what some of the major trading items for Thailand is things like jewelry, which is a luxury item, things like, polished rice, which is a refined food, which is also a Venusian type of food. Textiles, like, uh, with the fabrics and stuff for clothing and that sort of thing. So a lot of stuff there. Okay. All right. So then the birth dasha, the dasha means the planetary period. So the birth dasha or planetary period. And when we look at the planetary period, basically what we're looking at is of all these planets in this chart here, which one at specific times are going to be kind of more active or influential in the chart. Okay. So, birth dasha was Saturn, Moon, Mercury, Sun. So again, we're picking up that Sun energy here. So it's very strong leadership. But we have Saturn here. Saturn is in the 9th house. 9th house is authority, government, father, spirituality, religion, higher education, that sort of thing. Okay. So Saturn is interesting here because, one, it's retrograde. That line under Saturn means it's retrograde. That's going to give it strength. That's what it does in Vedic astrology. And you can see that it's 10 degrees, 18 minutes here. Saturn is in a nakshatra called Mula. Okay, so if you're not familiar, nakshatras, there are 27 nakshatras. In Vedic astrology, they're also known as lunar mansions. Every night the moon goes through a different one, and so each of these lunar mansions or nakshatras has a different energy. Okay, so the lunar mansion energy of Mula, and Mula is like a root. The symbol of Mula is a bunch of roots tied together. Okay, so I always think of farming. with Mula, okay? But depending, it's a very strong, transformative type of energy, okay? It might sound very la-di-da. It's like, if you're like a gardener, it's like, oh, let's put some seeds in the dirt and then water them and, watch them grow. But if you're really dependent on what grows, then it can be an arduous type of task, okay? But the whole process of farming, like planting seeds, is that most seeds actually don't make it to the top of the surface. I mean, it's like those little seeds, they have to have the right conditions to, make it through all the dirt to make it to the top and then, develop into whatever, like a lemon tree or a lily flower or whatever it's going to be. Okay. So again, in Mula, the deity associated with Mula is Nrichi, which is a form of a Kali, and Kali is the goddess of death and destruction. So Mula is not an easy breezy by any means type of nakshatra. And especially when you have a natural malefic planet like Saturn, and a strong Saturn because it's retrograde, um, you're going to get the more kind of negative aspects of that nakshatra. So again, Mula, you can think of it can be seen as like a death and transformation and that sort of thing, a turning over, potentially planting new seeds, but maybe those seeds don't really sprout. Okay. And the thing is, because Saturn as a planet represents things like death and destruction, okay, restructuring and stuff like that, we would get the more negative aspects of that. Okay. And so this retrograde Saturn in Mula is in this ninth house of government and leadership. Okay. So that's pretty hardcore energy. Okay. First off, especially since that's the, again, the main planetary period running, the Mahadasha of Saturn. Okay. So this is a very hardcore, again, I was just like, wow, okay, that's intense. And then you can see with Saturn, just almost 2 degrees away, we have Jupiter also retrograde, and Jupiter is in its own sign here. Okay. So that's going to be helpful. That's going to protect the house to some degree, not always. It tends to, when we have a kind of what we call a swa planet or planet in its own house, um, or yeah, in its own house, that can provide some protection, but the protection is more for inanimate things, not necessarily people. So this wouldn't necessarily protect the ruler like King Rama I, but it would protect, to some extent, the government. Okay. Now, Jupiter is also in this Mula energy. Okay. So we have, this kind of death, destruction, transformative energy turning over of both Saturn, which represents bureaucracy, like a government, and Jupiter, which represents spirituality. Okay. So we have this like, and these are very close together. So basically, I mean, these are almost on top of each other. It's like a melding together of Saturn bureaucracy with Jupiter spirituality. And apparently, that's what he did, was that he actually had a special kind of cleansing or ceremony type thing where he very much merged spirituality with the government, which I don't think was that prominent or evident or, before him. So he specifically was embedding spiritual leadership with government leadership. Instead of like separation of church and state, he did the opposite. He brought them together. And maybe he did that because it would give him more power and influence or sway people. I'm not really sure. Okay. Based on what I found out about him, I wasn't surprised. So anyway, but this is the thing is I was like, okay, this is pretty hardcore, like energy here in the ninth house. And then the thing about Mula, this nakshatra that Saturn and Jupiter are in, is that the star of Saturn and Jupiter, or sorry, the star of Saturn and Jupiter, well, they are in this particular chart, but the star of Mula is Ketu. Okay. And Ketu is down here in the 6th house of enemies and acute problems. Ketu is the south node of the moon. It represents things like sudden, hidden, unexpected, um, kind of, events, rebelliousness, separation, that sort of thing. It's kind of like Mars. Mars represents things like action, rebelliousness, leadership, like innovation type leadership. Um, but when it's out of balance, it can represent things like violence and anger and, destruction, that sort of thing. So the Saturn and, Jupiter already, they're like in a very intense nakshatra. And they're under the star, under the influence of Ketu here, which again, being a natural malefic planet in the sixth house here, this is basically hidden unexpected enemies. But that also means that the hidden unexpected enemies potentially is also the government and religious leadership here. So already I was just starting to look at the chart. I was like, wow, this is kind of intense. And I was like, hopefully I'm wrong, but I'm getting some kind of negative vibes here, especially because of the because again, if he's consulting with astrologers, what I'm seeing is that, potentially he, King Rama I, and the astrologers he was consulting with, if he did, well, there was some astrologer there. I don't know if they just cast a chart at that moment, or if they chose a specific moment to cast a chart. Which way does it go? There is some devious stuff going on here. Okay, there's a stain here. Okay, this is not light and bright and happy and clear and transparent. So I was like, okay, that's kind of intense. And this K2, just to finish off K2 is in a nakshatra called Chitra. Chitra is symbolized by a gemstone, like a cut gemstone. And so associated with Chitra is like architecture because of the cut facets, like a house would have sides for 6 or however many sides and a roof usually and this sort of thing. It's all about structure, right? Architecture. So, but when you have K2, which again brings this kind of hidden, unexpected, sometimes even devious, frankly, energy, with Chitra, this can be like a devious or hidden type of architecture. And so, especially with the Saturn and Jupiter in K2, there's a hidden, unexpected, potentially devious structure here. Okay. And yeah, so I was like, okay, I didn't want to, I was like, wow, that's just what I'm getting, but maybe that's what's really going on. So I kept going, okay. But yeah, so already we can see there's a lot of intensity in this chart. Okay. Then after Saturn, the main Mahadasha, there's Moon and Mercury. Okay, Moon is also Moon and Mercury are also quite exaggerated here. Because Moon is in its own house of Cancer in the 4th house. Okay, so that makes Moon strong because it's in its own house. It's Swa as well. But being in the 4th house, Moon represents mother, and the 4th house represents mother. Which sounds pretty good. But in Vedic astrology, it creates what we call a Karkabhavanasha, which is like basically there's almost like too much energy there. So it actually indicates that there's trouble with the Moon, which represents mother, and women and the public, and the 4th house, which represents home and mother and happiness. So, and also Moon there has Digbala directional strength as well. So we have a very exaggerate, in some ways it's a very strong Moon, or in other ways, but there's still problems associated with the Moon here. Okay. And then Mercury is with Venus in the 12th house here. Mercury is debilitated in Pisces in the 12th house here, okay? But it is aspecting its own sign in the 6th house here, okay? Mercury is a dual planet, and the 6th house, it's sitting in Pisces, which is a dual water sign. So there's going to be a lot of duality here. And Mercury represents things like analytical mind, decisions, communication, okay? And Mercury is aspecting the 6th house, and the 6th house is Virgo, which is a dual earth sign. So we're going to have not only, so we already have K2 as a sort of devious energy associated with luxury items again, like, gemstones and architecture. But then we have Mercury here bringing strength to the 6th house. So this is going to be very strong enemies who are dual in nature and devious in nature. Okay. And Venus is aspecting there as well. And again, Venus is, a planet of social grace and diplomacy, but Venus is debilitated in Virgo. So the enemies here are going to be hidden, unexpected, rich, probably, but quite devious and playing both sides, really. Okay. And again, all of this energy is underpinning the Saturn and Jupiter in the 9th house. So I was like, okay, this is looking kind of even more intense. But so we have, again, in the birth dasha, Saturn, which I've been talking about, Sun, this exalted, obvious leader here. But Moon and Mercury, like problems with mind and emotions, because Moon represents not only mother and public, but also emotion, the emotional mind. Mercury represents the analytical mind. Okay, so again, it's like structuring the mind and public leadership here. Okay. So that's I think the whole point of this, setting up a city pillar and putting a horoscope in it, that sort of thing. This whole big thing that he did. Actually, he did this before he got coronated. He didn't get coronated until June or something like that. So this was the first big symbolic establishment of himself, but also, his reign. Oh. All right, so that's the birth dasha. The current dasha is actually, they're back in Saturn again. So Saturn, Rahu, Mercury, Jupiter. So Saturn and Mercury still the same. Saturn's still this government deviousness, acute problems energy going on. And that's actually part of what's going on in the news with Thailand recently, is that the PM of Thailand was suspended by the courts because of some leaked phone call she had. Okay. I'll get into more of that later, but so there's issues here with some devious actions, acute problems with the government. Okay. And now with the current dasha, instead of Moon, we're running Rahu, but again, we're back in the 12th house here, which again Rahu is a north node of the Moon. So again, there's this ambitious drive with it. But the 12th house, again, it represents international trade. So really trying to work with that, especially because the U.S. is trying to impose different new tariffs around the world. So I'm sure Thailand is not immune to that. But the other thing is that this Rahu ambition in the 12th house of Pisces, Pisces is a dual water sign. So, and Mercury and Venus there, this is part of potentially why there's some border issues going on with Cambodia, and that's also been in the news. Okay. So, because of this sort of international land grab type thing that's going on here in this chart. Okay. And then as the sub period for the current dasha, we have Jupiter again. So again, we're picking up both of these planets in the 9th house that are under the star of Ketu. Again, this devious gemstone chitra energy in the 6th house. And again, that's part of what happened, was that it wasn't just a bureaucratic issue, but it was a legal issue. Potentially, this phone call and what the primary, and the courts got involved essentially with that whole thing. Okay, so then the Lagna Nakshatra. The Lagna again is a rising sign or ascendant here. The Lagna Nakshatra is in Bharani. Bharani is symbolized by a womb. So you can literally see this as the birthing of, with the sun here, exalted sun, the birthing of a very strong leader. So that fits exactly. Then the moon, the moon nakshatra, which again is a exaggerated moon because it's strong but weak. Strong moon, but it has issues as well. The moon here is in the star of Saturn right now because it's in the nakshatra of Pusha. So Pusha, is usually a very nice nakshatra, and luckily it is. So this, I would imagine, Pusha is it's represented by the udder of a cow. So it's got this very nurturing energy, like cows who give milk to their babies and other species who are orphaned like us humans. So there's very nurturing, stabilizing energy, but this is the moon. Okay, so and in the fourth house. So we're talking about home, we're talking about nurturing the public in homes, people, that sort of thing. But the star of Pusha is Saturn. So we're bringing this back to this, Saturn in Mula and the star of Ketu in the ninth house. So, so Moon and Pusha generally, though, would be probably a pretty nice, supportive, public. I'm guessing this is a fairly friendly type of society. I haven't been there myself, but I'm guessing that's maybe true. Based on this. But there are going to be issues here with nurturing homes and people and land, even though there's a lot of emotional energy there. Okay. So there is some strength there. Then the Sun Nakshatra. So again, we have an exalted sun at the top here in the Lugna. The Sun Nakshatra is in Ashwini. Ashwini. So Ashwini is symbolized by the Ashwini twins, who are considered to be the celestial healers. And so they ride around on horses, and they're sort of, these sort of valiant leaders, healing people, and gods, and all this sort of thing. Very cavalier. With their cavalry, with their cavalry and all, on the horses and everything. So, Ashwini brings a lot of pioneering energy, and so what we have is a strong pioneering leader. The birth of a strong pioneering leader here. And this is all happening in Aries, and Aries is uncharted land. The other thing is Aries is a movable fire sign. Okay, so that's going to be a lot of action. And then Sun is also a fire planet, so we're going to get the birth of a pioneering leader who's very active. But with all that fire energy, that may also mean that it's probably a Pitta type of leader, which again is not too surprising given what we're seeing in the ninth house here. But Pitta comes from Ayurveda, which was traditional Indian medicine. So it's one of the constitution types or symptom types. So when somebody has a lot of fire, they can have a lot of inflammation. That also means that their mind tends to be fiery. It tends to be an administrative leadership type of mind, very organized and the person tends to be very clear in the head and very calculating, can be rigid, can be irritated and violent if it gets out of control, though, out of balance. Okay. So again, a lot of fire going on here. So how does this chart recreate the current sky pattern? What similarities are we seeing with the current sky pattern? Well, not too long ago, again, when I started this whole Thailand astrology thing kind of came my way. Rahu, Mercury, and Venus were in Pisces back in April 2025. And we had eclipses there. And that's also when that earthquake happened, the 7.7 earthquake happened. Epicenter, again, Myanmar, but was strong enough to affect Bangkok, Thailand as well. So, the thing about this chart is that if you notice, the sun is at 10 degrees, 9 minutes of Aries, and Rahu is at 24 degrees, 43 minutes of Pisces. So, just a couple of weeks before this chart was cast, the sun was back in Pisces, and Rahu had just crossed from Aries to Pisces. So basically, we had Sun, Rahu, Mercury, Venus in Pisces, and that created a solar eclipse. And we just had a solar eclipse in Pisces with these planets. So it wasn't just because to get a solar eclipse, you need Sun, Moon, Rahu in a sign. But this particular last eclipse, we had Mercury and Venus as well. So we basically had a reproduction of the eclipses that happened in April of this year. So that's a big deal. Then also, let's see. Mars in this chart is in the second house, but it's aspecting the fifth house, which is Leo. So we have Martian energy in Leo, which we currently have. Actually, it just switched though. It's literally a few hours ago or yesterday, late yesterday. Mars switched out of Leo, but we had a Mars in Leo type energy going on. Also, Mars in Scorpio, because Mars can aspects 4 houses away from Leo. So we had Mars in Leo and Mars in Scorpio, same as this chart as of recently. Then currently, we have Saturn and Jupiter not in Sagittarius, but they're both aspecting Sagittarius. Okay, so you can see there's like a lot. So Mars is very similar. Saturn and Jupiter, there's a lot of similarities. Rahu, Mercury, Venus, recently similar. What else do we have? We have currently, or at the time when I started the analysis a couple days ago, Moon was Swa in Cancer, but it moves really quickly, so it's not there now. Well, actually, it is there now because there's a parivartana exchange of houses between Mercury and Moon, because Mercury is currently in Cancer and Moon is in Virgo, and so when you do the parivartana, Moon comes back to Cancer. So actually, you do have Moon back in Cancer right now. And then we have Mars, K2 aspecting Mars. That means that there's going to be a lot of this K2-ness, energy, again, deviants, hidden enemies, structure, gemstones, energy, attached to or embedded in Mars, which is, again, a fiery planet, innovative leadership. But Mars also represents siblings and it also represents enemies. So there's going to be like a lot of devious stuff going on here. So already we've got K2 on Mars, and we have K2 as a star of Saturn and Jupiter, and Sun is in Ashwini, and the star of Ashwini is K2 as well. And because of the position of, because Mercury is aspecting Virgo where K2 is, you actually take 5-9 aspects from K2. So you get a lot of K2 energy in this chart. Okay, again, this like sort of devious gemstone energy, enemy energy going on in this chart. Okay. So this could be like enemies who seem really nice, seem like, like really great people, friends even maybe. But when you scratch the surface a little bit, it's like there's a very devious nature going on here. Okay. So, yeah, so what else is similar? Saturn is retrograde. Okay, so where Saturn currently is retrograde, it's not in Mula, which again has a lot of associations with this energy of death and transformation, but it is in Uttar Bhadrapada, which is also associated with death. So Mula is symbolized by a bunch of roots. So again, the seed transversing the soil, growing through that. But Uttar Bhadrapada is symbol of that is the back legs of a funeral pyre. So smoke and flames, things turning to ash. Although there is like this notion with Ats Nakshatra of actually maybe bringing a little bit of structure and reining in the chaos of that transformation. And also like surrender and release, like, the whole process of cremation is about like releasing the soul from the body. So, but again, Saturn, planet of death and destruction, Mula and, the Bhadrapada nakshatras are quite similar in a lot of ways, in terms of really intense transformation, destruction, and maybe even death, So, yeah, that's what we're starting with, folks. So I was just thinking, wow, Thailand's like a, like fun travel destination, and it is, and we'll see that, and that's that like Venus exalted with Rahu, because Rahu is in a pretty nice nakshatra. Rahu's in Revati, which is about travel and hospitality, and Venus is again luxury items, and Mercury is about play. So this is about like a really, ambition towards international travel destination playland. Essentially, this 12th house here for the Bangkok Thailand chart. Okay, so just to give a little bit more general, get the general vibe for the chart here, and then I'll go through house by house. The Lagna again is that Aries or Mesha and Lagna, and Mesha in Sanskrit. Movable fire sign, a lot of action energy here. Char Agni, exalted sun in Ashwini, so again, pioneering, very strong pioneering leader. And this is aspected by Jupiter, which again is in Mula. So it's not just, again, like a administrator, but it's like a spiritual administrator, because Jupiter represents spirituality. And Jupiter, we get more of that spirituality energy because it's in the 9th house of spirituality. So again, he's, again, not just melding the Saturn and Jupiter together in the 9th house, not only melding like the mundane leadership with the spiritual leadership, but snapping again in the 1st house through the aspect of Jupiter. But again, Sun is in the star of K2, Jupiter is in the star of K2. We're getting a ton of K2 energy, like embedded in various levels of him and his reign here. So again, all this together, much action, planting seeds of administration and law. Unusual though, but traditional as well, because Saturns are, so they're still like, using the tools, traditional tools, like, building a pillar and building a building and a shrine and putting a horoscope there, like they're still using the tools people are familiar with, but they're like giving it a whole new twist, essentially. And that's that Mula energy. Mula can be very like, again, unexpected and, hidden and, So, but again, I was saying unusual tradition, but also spiritual structure here. And this could literally be the pillar in the horoscope, besides like the government and country and the city of Bangkok. But there's some sort of blemish here, I would say, with the spirituality. And I was really hoping like that wasn't the case, but because we keep seeing it over and over again, I was like, there's something not quite right here. It's almost, I mean, I don't like to use these words because I think they're kind of strong, but it's like almost like a, like a, how do I say, like, dark magic or something like that, like some sort of pundit who is like paid rather than really doing it from just a purely spiritual, high-minded perspective or something like that. Like, especially because this happened, because he started his reign on April 6th. So again, like 2 weeks before he started his reign and put this pillar down with the horoscope. And I'm like, how much time did they really have to really do a good, especially because again, they didn't have software. They have to do all this calculations and stuff by hand and whatever their methods are, So I was like, that doesn't seem like a lot of time to really choose a really great date. But this chart, if it was done on purpose, not just a time marker for when the pillar was put up, there's a lot of strength here, but there's also a lot of deviousness here as well. So, yeah. And again, this like leader, I kept getting this like leader government is enemy, because of this K2, Saturn and Jupiter being the K2 of, and the star of K2. So yeah, the other thing is that Saturn and Jupiter, they're both retrograde. They don't technically get into war, but they're close enough that, and they travel together for a while, is that when the planets are in war, you're gonna get like they're both gonna be unstable, first of all, but then the things that they symbolize, so it's against bureaucracy is gonna be unstable, spirituality is gonna be unstable, law is gonna be unstable, like, yeah, that was like, also, adding to the picture I was already seeing. It was reinforcing the picture I was already seeing, essentially. And again, as I mentioned, there was a solar eclipse or surya grahan on April 12th, which is just a few, like what, 10 days and 9 days before this. So we're going to get all the solar eclipse energy, which is going to bring out more of this like Rahu, Ketu nodes, unusual, unexpected, ambition, drive, deviousness energy, frankly. So I was like, wow, this is like a wild, wild chart here. And then Rama I crowned himself April 6th. And that's what they celebrate in Thailand is Chakri Memorial Day, because Chakri is the name of the period that started with his reign. which was like, again, in many ways, very strong because he was a strong leader. So it really developed a strength in administration and identity. And I think for like what I read about him is that he spent most of his reign fighting neighboring countries, like I think Cambodia and Laos and stuff like that. So establishing Thailand that way. And also, actually, I read that Thailand was the only country in that Southeast Asia area that was not colonized. So again, probably because of strong leadership here, frankly. So, again, it's not all bad. And also this Chakri period that's celebrated on April 6th, it's also, his reign was considered the golden age because part of what he did was he created some stability, but then I think he also, was a patron to the arts or, supported that as well in the country. Which makes sense because Venus is exalted and Moon is exalted, or Moon is Swa. So, and Venus and Moon are the two aesthetic and arts planets. So we have strong arts here going on. Home, traditional arts, this Moon, because again, the fourth house can be tradition, lineage. So strong tradition of hospitality, strong tradition of arts, public arts, traditional arts, and then foreign export, enough to produce and nice enough to produce and make money for the country. Especially like I think jewelry is one of the top 10 exports that the country has today. So yeah, this chart again brought him, Rama the First and Bangkok slash Thailand to a new height of power, and it was a golden age. But again, because Saturn and Jupiter and Ketu are so intertwined, or Saturn and Jupiter are intertwined, with Ketu, and Ketu is again on the two leadership planets. Ketu is aspecting Mars, and Ketu, Sun is in a star of Ketu. There's a lot of Ketu energy in this chart. So that's just, what I'm seeing here. So the yogas are planetary combinations that give extra sort of meta effects in a chart. And so there's a bunch of yogas here. So one of them is a Kuja dosha or mangalik. That's Mars in the second house. That's going to give problems with relationships. Okay. And we'll talk more about that. And then there's Papavashi and Shubhavashi. These are two solar yogas because there's natural benefics in the 12th house from the sun and the natural malefic Mars in the second house from the sun. So the Papavashi will bring defaming others, being unattractive, and keeping low company. And again, this is the sun. This is the leader here. And then the Shubhavashi is being renowned, dear to all, and rich. So there's a duality here, which is not surprising because, again, the Saturn and Jupiter in the 9th house are in a dual sign. Jupiter's a dual planet as well. And this is aspecting the sun. So Jupiter's aspecting the sun. So there's a mixed, you could tell, like, you couldn't really know who to trust, at this time, frankly. Then we do have close to a couple of let me not skip that. So we do have a Lakshmi yoga here because of the strong Swa Jupiter in the 9th house, and the Lugna is strong here, and Venus is strong. So that you could assume that there's going to be a lot of great wealth and money coming in for him, specifically Rama the First and the country and the administration. Then we have a couple of spiritual yogas, almost, but I think they're strong enough that they probably give something, even if they're not complete. There's a Shrikant yoga and a Virenshi yoga here, I believe. At least there's signs of it. So the Shrikant yoga is going to be the what is it? Strong sun, so exalted sun, Swa moon, and then what is it? Yeah, Lugnatia. Mars is not Swa or exalted, but its dispositor is. So, and they're all in positive houses. So I was like, except for that, I was like, I still think that's pretty close to a Shrikant, and Shrikant brings spirituality and performing like different rites and rituals, which again, just even like setting up the city pillar and having the horoscope drawn up and all that. I mean, that's ritual, right? Right. So I think there is some of that. And then there's also the Virenchi yoga, which is going to be, what is that going to be? There is going to be, I just remember here. Oh, that's going to be a strong Jupiter, which it is. I mean, it's a really strong Jupiter, a retrograde and Swa here, and a strong Saturn, which Saturn Saturn is strong because its disposer, its landlord is so strong. This like Swa retrograde Jupiter. The other thing is Saturn is in the star of Ketu, but in a substar of Saturn. So actually, Saturn is almost sort of Swa by star. Okay, I mean, I'm trying not to like stretch this too much, but I mean, it's just like like technically, it's this is a pretty strong indication of some spirituality here. And then the fifth lord being strong, and the fifth lord is his exalted sun. I'm like, with the sun being so strong, Jupiter being so strong, Saturn with such a strong Jupiter, and being in a substar of Saturn itself, I was like, it's pretty close to Virenchi yoga. So that also brings spirituality, knowledge of Brahma, the creator, God, the Vedas. So again, traditional text, Shastra, and being revered. So again, but the thing is, again, it seems like this is a manipulation because of this K2 and Chitra in the sixth house. So there is, and again, it seems like it's tainted somehow. And then we do have a Nietzsche Banga. So this Mercury, is debilitated here, but because it's with the planet that's exalted in the sign that's debilitated, that brings Mercury up a bit. So Mercury's not as weak as it might seem. And then we have a Balarishta yoga here. So the Balarishta yoga is usually when I see 4 or more planets in negative houses, and we have Ketu, Rahu, Mercury, Venus here in negative houses, this can indicate difficult beginnings. Like for a person's chart, this can mean like difficulty in childhood, like physically, medically, mentally, emotionally. Sometimes it's just a phase, and sometimes it's so strong that the child doesn't really survive, can be. So again, this is a very fragile beginning here for Bangkok, Thailand, and then Rama I, but you can see a lot of strength as well. Then the chidra grahas, these are plants of vulnerability. And so these are like, they can indicate parts in places in somebody that are vulnerable or sensitive or Achilles heel, that sort of thing. So we have Saturn twice over, and Saturn we already know is compromised in various ways. Moon and Venus. So again, arts, and Moon and Venus represent women. So, and Saturn represents again tradition and bureaucracy and that sort of thing, and endurance. Also, like again, chronic illness, death. So this together is really like these are still hard times, and again, a lot of I think difficulty, like with women, like suppression of women's rights, I would even say. And the other thing is that Moon and Venus in this chart are both in a star of Saturn. So that's going to bring this, like, again, really hardcore Mula energy through Saturn to Moon, mom, home, land, tradition, and Venus. So this could be like, again, like sort of a twisting, or it's a strong word. I don't know if I'll say it, but again, it's probably too strong a perversion of traditional role of women, you know. And so I think what that gets into is that, again, the women are, women have strength here. Venus is exalted, Moon is Swa. But again, the sex trade in, that's pretty prominent. It's been prominent in Thailand and Bangkok. Like, I don't think, it doesn't seem to me, again, this might just be my opinion, but it doesn't seem to me like if this is really like up and up, stainless type of um, spirituality going on here involved with the administration. I don't know that they would have supported such a strong development of sex trade in Thailand over time. You know what I mean? Like it's like they might have used uh, some some things in I don't know, written works or whatever to justify that instead of you know um, kind of try to build women up in other ways to honor them. I mean, educate them maybe, but or something like that, or there's so many other ways to support an economy. So anyway, then we have the yogi, the abhiyogi, and the duplicate yogi here. The yogi, these are planets that indicate wealth or lack of wealth. So the yogi indicates wealth, and that's Jupiter. So again, that's spirituality and law. And again, it's very strong here. So there's a lot of money coming in. And then the abhiyogi is the sun. So this could be, again, the leadership here. Um, yeah, leadership. And then the duplicate yogi, which brings in wealth, is Venus, which is exalted in the 12th house. So again, that's going to be especially international trade of art, women, luxuries, and again, um, sensuality, sexuality, all this sort of thing. So you can see where the money's coming in. Yeah. So yeah, okay. So that's a general overview. Now I'm going to go through house by house and see what we see here. Okay, so on this side, everything on the left is the same. The stuff on the right are my notes for the other houses. And I did want to say, again, I'm not trying to be critical or whatever of other countries and their practices or laws or whatever. I'm just seeing what I see in the chart. And technically, prostitution, things like that, are illegal in Thailand, but I think it's still happening quite a bit. That's sort of what it's known for, right? So again, that's that kind of on the books. It looks like something, but in reality, it's kind of different. And that's again what I was seeing in the chart. So, so yeah, the second house here, second house lord is this exalted Venus in Uttar. So, that's that, back legs of funeral pyre energy. So again, that's also not super great because the star that Venus is in is Saturn, and then it's in this, which is again death, destruction, chronic illness, um, poverty, employment, servants, that sort of thing. And then Uttar is also like a funeral pyre energy, right? So that's a tough place for Venus to be because it's almost like those energies are the exact opposite of Venus. And Venus, even though it's exalted, it's in the 12th house of loss and expenditures here. So this can be, loss again, almost like a loss or tainting again of like women's rights, that sort of thing. And then Mars is in the second house in Rohini. So Rohini is it's considered to be the most attractive, seductive type of nakshatra, and Mars is a planet representing libido. So, and the second house represents gains. So this could be gains related to, you know, seductive libido is, that sort of literally can be. And then we have an aspect of K2, which again is that kind of, unusual energy associated with the gemstone. So this is like, this can be unusual money related to, libido. So again, it seems to indicate, again, the sex trade as well. But also Mars can represent things like surgery. So, and with K2 there, I was like, okay, so there's some sort of unusual surgery, but it's like attractive, seductive. It's bringing beauty and wealth. So, and so what I was looking at when I was reading about Thailand is that it's one of the major destinations for like sex reassignment surgery and also plastic surgery. Like it's a big part of the tourism trade is medical tourism. So you could see that there as well. And then Mars represents things like the military. And so again, there's this, I'm guessing Rama the First was an attractive military guy. But then again, there's this hidden, unexpected twist to him that's a bit hidden, yeah, so there can also be here because the second house represents family and assets. So it looks like with K2 and Mars here and the Lord going to the 12th house, there was like some sort of loss or explosion or frankly even annihilation of family. And this ties in with the third house, which I'll get into. But basically, part of what happened here was that Rama I, his father, was working for the king and had some other relatives involved, supporting the royalty. And he himself came into the royal court when he was young and became a companion to the king before him. And so they were buddies growing up and all this sort of thing. And then apparently at some point, Rama I killed that king that he was companions with, childhood companions with, and his sons, and took over. So I was like, oh, yeah, okay. So I wasn't too far. So I was like, I'm trying not to be negative, but I was like, I was just getting such a negative vibe from this ninth house. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. So this Mars K2 in the second house, the second house is not only family, but inner circle. So he was buddies with this guy and then killed him in his family. So that's here in this chart. And then the third house is sort of similar. The third house lord is Mercury. It's also an Uttar again, the funeral pyre energy. And Mercury represents friends, and the third house represents friends, siblings, and neighbors. And then we have this retrograde Saturn and Jupiter, again, dual in nature, aspecting the third house. So I was like, there's a history of destroying siblings and neighbors and friends. And that's essentially what he did, because the childhood companion thing is almost like a non-biological sibling, especially they don't let too many, people close to the royalty, that was a very elite, uh, protected pathway and status to have. And so he did that, and then he turned it on the king before him. I did look at as well at the D3, which is the Dracana. That kind of gives you more information about the third house. And Jupiter was at the top of that chart. And when you have Jupiter at the top of the D3, that can indicate problems with siblings. Especially Jupiter represents older siblings, that sort of thing. So this could be like, again, the demise or killing of older siblings. Yeah. So then the fourth house here, fourth house lord is a Swa, Karkabhava, Nasha, Digbala moon. Issues, stabilizing, nurturing home, women, mothers. Again, I think there are issues there. Very emotional. Also, water boundaries. Cancer is about water boundaries. So apparently there's a lot of flooding that goes on here because Bangkok is right on the edge of the, the Gulf of Thailand. Had to review my geography. During this research for this talk. So yeah, so you can see with the moon, because the moon is going to go through various cycles here, there's going to be trouble stabilizing the land because moon represents liquid water and it's in Cancer. So water with boundaries because it's on the edge of the, on either side there's like boundaries, with the water there. And then there's a river that goes through Bangkok that, empties out into the Gulf of Thailand. So it's also they mentioned Bangkok is often compared to Venice because it used to be. Now it's all about like road transport, but it used to be like a city of canals, like Venice, which is kind of cool. And then also it's compared to New York because it's so like ambitious. So instead of calling it the Big Apple, they call it the Big Mango. And then it was also. Oh, that was also interesting. I thought the official name of Bangkok is very, very long. It's literally the longest place name in the world, as according to the World Book of Guinness Records or Guinness Book of World Records. And but part of that super long title is City of Angels, which is Los Angeles, the City of Angels in Spanish. So yeah, so there's comparisons to LA, which is sort of considered to be like a playland, but also like how would I say, like, especially because the movie industry, like a bit of deception, but sort of glorified deception, Um, in a way, entertaining glorified deception, and then ambition from New York, and then sort of like a romantic quality because of Venice, Um, so yeah, so I thought that, and you can see all that in this chart, which is interesting. So the fourth house, yeah, we did that. The fifth house, fifth lord is this exalted sun, very strong. So the fifth house is children. It's also advice, counseling, can be spirituality as well. Um, uh, and then it's aspected though by this Mars, which is influenced by K2, and then Jupiter, which is also influenced by. So this fifth house, the Lord is in a star of K2. It's aspected by Mars, which is aspected by K2, and it's aspected by Jupiter, which is aspected by K2. So all the elements of the fifth house are K2 in nature. That's a lot of hidden, unexpected, enemy energy here in the, you know, house of advice, and Mars and Jupiter together will give law. So, whatever is being built here into law, probably self-serving in nature. Yeah. So what did I put here? Enemy advice first. Oh, and then Mars is land, and also again martial law, military law. Yeah. So sixth house here, sixth house lord is Mercury. Aspect of his own house is going to make it strong. So they're going to be strong enemies, but like pretty practical. And again, Venus is aspecting here, but Venus is debilitator here. So like I would say almost unmerciful. Unusual, destructive enemies, almost like a cleansing type of job here, going on. And then also, there's sort of like, again, this two categories of women's value being created here, it seems like in society. So then the seventh house here, the Lord is this exalted Venus in the 12th house. So, and the seventh house represents spouse-like partner, also independent business and path forward in life. So again, there might be issues, again with spouses that are, frankly going off to remote places for sexual dalliances, but this also means there's going to be strong international trade as business going on here. And Sun will bring this pioneering energy, though. So unusual pioneering foreign trade going on in the seventh house. The eighth house lord is Mars, an aspect its own. So again, this is going to be a deep transformation. But again, Mars represents lust and physical beauty and that sort of thing. And the eighth house is all about sexuality here. So there's going to be like devious, lustful sexual practices going on here. Or unusual. Again, I'm trying to stay away from whatever, too strong language or judgmental language. I guess I'm not sure how else to convey it though. So, um, so if it sounds harsh, I don't mean to be at all. I'm just trying to read the chart. And again, when I always do the chart first and then I look at the history and then I was like, it pretty much matches up with what I was saying. So, then the ninth house here we've been talking about. So the ninth lord is a small retrograde Jupiter with a retrograde Saturn, both in Mula, aspected by Mars. So Saturn and Mars together is engineering. It's military, and then you get the bureaucracy from Saturn. You get the Jupiter spirituality. So unusual, and this is all K2 influence. So unusual engineering of structure, law, spiritual government traditions, and extreme cycles. Because again, Saturn's like the great malefic and Jupiter's the great benefic. There's going to be huge cycles of like up and down with the government, like not only within Rama the first reign, but in general with Thailand. And uh, conflict, a lot of conflict. Leader is enemy, but again, this K2 business and sixth house of enemies. I was actually seeing like reign of terror. I don't like to use strong language, but that's kind of what I was seeing. But I think it was true based on what I was reading. And again, dirty pundit I was getting. So again, like he might have put the astrologers who were just going to support his agenda rather than support what was best for the soul of Thailand. Let's put it that way. So successful, but more in a material way, maybe more than a spiritual way, let's say there. And so again, as I mentioned, he executed the past king and his sons, and this was the beginning of an absolute monarch, like merging spirituality with government. And Thailand, since 1932, has had 20 different constitutions. So I will talk about the first constitution, but you can see there's a lot of like turning over here. There's no steadiness here. And apparently Thailand also is fourth on the list of countries who've had the most coups. So again, there's like constant like government takeovers because again, that's what we're seeing in the chart here, like hostile takeovers. And again, he tied together Buddhism because most of the country is Buddhism, I think like 95% or so, and government together. Then the 10th house lord is Saturn, which again is in this Mula energy, K2, and it's 12 houses from the 10th, so that's going to be loss of employment. The moon is aspecting here as well as K2, so the moon, there's some, hospitality involved here. K2 is going to bring like unusual, what was it? Unusual or even like separation from work and stuff like that. So, and the 10th house is also not only work but also reputation. So unusual loss of public work and reputation. So apparently, 64% of Thailand the economy is based on informal workers. So they're sort of like gig workers. They'll go and work for whatever, like on a farm for a while and then a factory for a while and that sort of thing. There's also, I think, a fairly high rate of lack of education, I would say. Yeah. And then, oh, did I mention that too? Oh, no. Okay, I'll get back to it. So, let's keep going forward here. So then the 11th house lord is Saturn again. It aspects its own house. So that's going to be strong. That's going to be a traditional society. The 11th house is income, but also traditional society. But this could also be like the Saturn, like government funneling income to itself. That's really what I was saying. Yeah. And then the 12th house we've been talking about. The 12th house lord is Jupiter, exalted Venus, debilitated Mercury, both in Uttar with Rahu and Revati. So international trade and luxuries, art, hospitality, sex. I would even say drugs here as well, because Rahu can represent like drugs and stuff like that, and addictions and entertainment. So yeah, a lot of income coming out from those things. And just a few things again, just to reiterate. I was just having a hard time placing it in the notes here, but the third house is Virgo. And if you ever look at the earthquake analysis I did for the earthquake that just happened in Myanmar and Thailand in April, the Lugna there was Gemini, which is the third house here of neighbors. So the neighbors had the earthquake, yeah. And also, and then also, there's a ceasefire that was recently announced because Cambodia and Thailand since May, got into some trouble, and they were even bombing each other and stuff about some border disputes and stuff like that. And so that's again what we're seeing, this third house of neighbors and siblings and stuff like that. Because we're also like this Saturn, we're running the current job here, Saturn and Jupiter, right? So the Saturn and Jupiter is going to be very active with this destructive Mula K2 energy on the third house. So it probably seems sort of strange and out of the blue. And when I was reading about it, they don't, at least in the news that I read, they're still arguing about who started it, like Cambodia or Thailand. So it's like, they don't know. So mysterious, like a K2 and Rahu. Then the fourth house, the flooding and canals I mentioned. Sixth house of K2 in Chitra. This sort of like made me laugh a little bit. So apparently, with the tourism industry in Thailand, there's quite a bit of scams that goes on, and which happens in most countries with tourism. They try to get what they can out of tourists. Um, but one of the biggest scams specifically is jewelry scams. So selling jewelry at a very high price when it's really worth almost nothing. And this is this K2 and chitra, like hidden, not just something that seems like a gem, but like when you scratch on the surface, it's like not very valuable or kind of devious. I was like, wow, that's like so literal here. Then the ninth house, again, because we're activating Saturn and Jupiter, there's going to be this sort of devious turning over of government and administration. And again, the Thailand PM was recently suspended by the courts there. And then the 12th house here. So again, Bangkok is a hub in Asia for both travel and finance. It is also known as Sin City of Asia. So again, it's like this is not, what I'm seeing in the ninth house here. This is, even though you have this very strong Jupiter, which seems really great, it's not spotless. And then these 12th house exports, a lot of them cars, which is Venus, technology, which is Mercury and Rahu, luxury items like textiles and jewelry, Venus, and then rice, which is a refined food, which is Venus as well. So you can see how this chart really, shows up, as Thailand. So we've got more here, though. Let's see what else we got. So, I did look at just power and leadership for this Bangkok capital chart. Just to see, like, again, part of why I was doing this was just to see, like, kind of how much, to some extent, like how much they follow what I practice, I guess, is Jyotish, or classical Indian astrology. So I didn't know if they were doing amsha analysis or they were looking at that at all. Or again, it's not clear to me whether this is just a time marker or like a distinctly chosen chart for this time to support the king and his reign. So I just picked up the two amshas that most related to power and leadership. So these subcharts, subzodiacs, subdivisional charts, amshas, they're all different names for the same thing. They give more nuance about the main chart, and then they also give more information about timing because they're based on dasha periods. So what I did was I put the birth dasha against Saturn, Moon, Mercury, Sun, just to remind everybody, and then the current dasha of Saturn, Rahu, Mercury, Sun, or Saturn, Rahu, Mercury, Jupiter, and I circled those planets so we can see, like, what was kind of very active when the birth chart was first cast and then currently, and to see how that lines up. So the first chart here at the top is the Dashamsha D10 for career and reputation, and then the second one's Ekadamsha D11 for income and public support and elections. So, so the D10, Jupiter, Sun, and Rahu are not well placed. So, that's going to be more troublesome, I think, right now because Thailand's running a sub periods of Rahu and Jupiter. But there is a parivartana exchange of houses between Jupiter and Saturn. So again, you get Jupiter and Saturn very tightly linked here, even in this D10. So that's very similar to the natal chart. And Jupiter and Saturn, that also means Jupiter and Saturn are going to be all over the chart. So again, bureaucracy and spirituality. But Jupiter and Saturn are located in the third house of siblings and enemies, siblings and neighbors, and Saturn's in the fourth house of home, happiness, and that sort of thing. So this whole D10 is dominated by Jupiter and Saturn in similar ways that I think it was in the natal chart. The other thing is that Saturn and Jupiter are both aspecting the ninth house again. So it's almost exactly like the main chart. Jupiter in the third house, though, might indicate changes and endings. And then we have Rahu and Sun, with the debilitated Mars in the 8th house. So Rahu brings ambition, Sun and Mars are leadership. But with the debilitated Mars, this is going to be like a, erratic, even more erratic Mars, which is again military, anger, violence, that sort of thing. And Rahu here, so this is going to be like a hidden leader with a very strong, ambitious, but probably violent agenda here. And also Rahu and Sun, this is going to be scandals. The 8th house is like scandals and death and long-term issues and stuff like that, and deep psychology. Yeah, it just looks like there's some sort of hidden agenda through government and leaders here. And the other thing is that the Sun, which is here with Rahu and Mars in the 8th house and a negative house, the Sun is the lord of the 9th house of, again, government and spirituality. So we don't have Sun with Ketu. Well, we have Sun and Ketu in the 2nd house, but we have Sun with Rahu. So again, this hidden, ambitious energy, again, sort of twisting Sun a bit. And again, since the 9th lord has gone 12 houses away, there are going to be losses through leadership and government. So not all on the up and up, what we're seeing here. Yeah, and then, and again, this Rahu's Sun and the Mars in the 8th house, that's also scandals, which, Thailand just went through that with their PM. And then the Ekadamsha D11, this is important for income, but also public support in like elections. So even though he wasn't elected, he crowned himself. This is also important, again, I think, for public support, understanding public support. So Moon and Jupiter are not well placed. And Jupiter, so again, in both charts, Jupiter's in negative house, and Jupiter represents spirituality. The other thing in this chart, kind of like the D10, the 9th lord is gone 12 houses away, so losses through government. In the D11, Jupiter is the lord of the 9th house, and it's gone 12 away again. So losses through not only government, but I would say spirituality as well, because that's what Jupiter indicates. So yeah. Yeah, so and then in this chart we have a parivartana exchange between Mars and Mercury. So we have Mars all over the chart, Mercury all over the chart. So Mars is, again, leadership, rebelliousness, violence, maybe even action, military. Mercury is analytical, logical mind. So this is just about logistics, more than heart or whatever. And Mars and Mercury together, the other thing is that Mars represents thieves and Mercury represents speech. And so when you get Mercury with Mars, sometimes Ketu and Rahu, you can get like it can be like a liar's combination. So there can be deceit here. But Mars and Mercury together, this is going to be like aggressive speech, decisions, deceits. And again, Mars is in the 3rd house of neighbors. Mercury's in the 5th house of advice, which is sort of similar to what it was in the main chart, because we had what in the natal chart, 5th house lord was Sun, aspected by Mars again, and Jupiter. So again, military decision, aggressive decisions. Then we have a SWA Saturn, very strong Saturn, with Sun, aspecting Rahu and Ketu. So we have Saturn, Sun, Rahu, Ketu in the Lugna here. Again, a deviant, ambitious leader who's got a lot of endurance, but frankly, kind of a destructive, fairly destructive leader, I would say. And then also there's a Pop Sankhya Yoga with soul enemies here. So there's a lot of, contentious issues going on here in this D11, you know, but it gives strength, longevity, uh, leader ambition, but hidden disputes, separation. And Saturn is aspecting the 9th house again. So again, we keep getting Saturn in the 9th house. And also aspecting the 9th lord. Is that correct? Oh, and then the ninth lord is in the eighth house again. Yeah, so losses through. So yeah, I mean, and Saturn is exalted in the fourth house, so problems at home. So this is looking more like and Saturn again, in both of these charts is aspecting Venus. So we keep seeing, like in the main chart, Venus was in a star of Saturn, that sort of thing. So we keep seeing this Saturn-Venus combination over and over again, which is going to bring, obstacles to women, frankly, and arts, diplomacy, all the nice things that Venus can represent. So it can represent traditional values regarding these things as well, like traditional arts, which is a part of what Thailand exports and stuff like that. But with this D11, let's see. So the birth dasha was Saturn, Moon, Mercury, Sun. So yeah, that just looks like very just tenacious leader making strong, aggressive decisions there. Public problem not involved, looks like. And again, the Lord of the fourth house, Lord of the sixth house has gone to the eighth house. So there's going to be long-term problems with the moon, which is emotions, mind, women. It's also the Lugnatia here. So uh, yeah, there's long-term problems here with the public and public support, it looks like. And then now the dasha period is Saturn, Rahu, Mercury, Jupiter. So again, there's troubles here, losses of literally losses of and from government and law, legal issues going on. So in both of these charts, Jupiter's in a negative house, so that's not great for Jupiter and things it represents. Saturn's aspecting the ninth house. Saturn's aspecting Venus. The ninth lord has gone to the eighth house. Mars is also aspecting Jupiter. So again, issues, losses from leadership, women, spiritual, and this Mars with Jupiter. Oh, what I got from that was like spirituality as a weapon, which is kind of what I was getting with that Saturn. When I said that kind of spirituality was kind of tainted in the main chart, I was getting like spirituality is sort of like a weapon to gain control and corral people or influence people and things like that. So yeah, a lot going on there. But I got some other stuff, so hold on. Okay, so at that point of my analysis into the birth chart of Bangkok and Thailand, I was like, wow, this is pretty intense. And again, if society has a strong interest and tradition of astrology and spirituality, because I mean that's kind of the irony, right? Of like Bangkok is like not only is it a place like sort of like Las Vegas and stuff like that, but it's got all these temples and things like that. So it's like this duality going on there of attractions, but also probably maybe integrated, maybe not. I don't know, sort of values. So I was like, but specifically, what I was kind of wondering about, especially because of that really strong, intense Saturn Jupiter combination of Mula in the ninth house, and everything in the and such a strong influence of K2 in the chart. I was like, this does not seem like even though there are advantages like all the wealth and all this kind of stuff. I was like, I don't know, like what about like maybe a new chart? Like, why not create a new chart and maybe try to ameliorate some of this stuff, um, potentially. So then I was looking at other events, and the first event I looked at, which seemed to be probably the most appropriate one, is that there was the first constitution of Thailand was created in 1932. So I looked at that chart and I was like, so, did that change anything? Is it better? How does that compare to the main chart? So that's what I was going to look at now is the chart for the first constitution of Thailand. And we'll see what we see. So, okay, so here's the chart. The chart is for the 10th of December, 1932, 10:29 a.m., Bangkok, Thailand. Okay. Now, for this, I do know for sure that this time was specifically chosen by astrologers. Okay, and it was even an article was printed up in Time magazine about it. Okay, so I'm like, okay, now they're really, I know for sure. The other one, I was like, were they just doing it on the fly, or did he pay some pundits to create a chart or whatever to protect him and his agenda, Rama the First or whatever? So we'll see. I was like, I would guess. I mean, if I was sort of involved, I would try to soften, especially that ninth house, because that's pretty hardcore. And try to change that somehow. And let's see if they did. Let's see what they did. Because again, this was specifically chosen to kind of reinvent Bangkok and Thailand. So the day lord here is Saturn, and the Ra lord is Sun. Okay, so what do we got going on here? Well, Saturn is Swa in its own house at the top here. So, and we have a Capricorn rising chart, which is all about like it's a Chara Prithvi, so a movable earth sign. So this is a building type of sign or constellation. And Saturn is here, and Saturn is about longevity and history and endurance. And Saturn is very strong. So this is going to be a very strong Saturn. Okay. So already, because it's in the Lugna here, the rising sign, this is going to be all about longevity and endurance and tradition. And Saturn is in a nakshatra called Uttarashada, which is a victory type of energy. The thing, though, is it's a victory, it's a sharp, piercing victory, like it's symbolized by an elephant tusk. So that can indicate military and, fighting type energy, but victory in those fights. Okay. But anyway, Saturn is very strong here. Let's just start there. So longevity, I'm already seeing. And the other thing is Saturn is going to be a Swa Saturn in Capricorn is going to be a much more sober, like predictable, plotting, almost workaholic type energy. Versus like that exalted sun in K2 star, in Aries, where it was like, like in your face. So already a very different energy, okay, with this first constitution. Then the Hara Lord or our Lord is the sun. So again, leadership, we're picking up leadership again. And the sun is in Jyesta nakshatra, which is symbolized by a talisman, which is all about protection. And the sun, though, is in the 11th house. Okay, the 11th house is a kamasthana, so it's a house of enjoyment. But the 11th house is also clubs, groups, and society. So this is a leadership that protects, society. So again, that's probably pretty good. And the star of Jyesta is Mercury, and it's so the sun is in the star Mercury, and Mercury retrograde Mercury is close to it. Mercury is in a nakshatra called Anuradha. Okay, Anuradha is victory, but a victory through building bridges and forming alliances. And Mercury is the lord of the ninth house of government, spirituality, and the lord of third house of enemies. So just from that, I'm like, okay, they were trying to fix the ninth house. So I was like, okay, we're vibing here. I'm vibing with these astrologers from 1932 of like, we got to fix this ninth house, man. This ninth house is like really like hardcore. So now there's this, not that this chart is without issue, but clearly they have toned it down and tried to clean up at least the agenda. I don't know if they cleaned up the government completely, because we've got more to talk about here, but um, cleaned up at least the agenda of government officials and spiritual officials as well. Okay. So this is a victory, but through building bridges, which is it's probably the nicest victory nakshatra of the bunch of the 27. Okay, so already it's and building bridges with enemies as well. So that's nice, rather than like, shoot first, ask questions later or whatever, hostile takeovers, which seem to be the case with the original ancient chart for Bangkok and Thailand. Okay, so the birth dashas here. The birth dasha is Venus, Saturn, Venus, Mars. Well, this is also, I think, clearly chosen. Okay. Why is that? Well, Venus is Swa in the 10th house. So again, remember the 10th house in the first Bangkok chart was Capricorn, Mars, aspected by K2, and Saturn was in Mula, was 12 houses away, so losses, and then it was in Mula, and then in stars of K2 Saturn. So not great employment. And also the 10th house is reputation, and the 10th house is also like for, kind of future. So we have the Swa Venus. So that's pretty good. Okay. So again, we're against strong arts, strong women, strong luxury, all the things associated with Venus. And then Saturn is aspecting here. So we're still getting that Saturn on Venus. Okay. So that's a very consistent thing, which again can be traditional arts, but it can also be obstacles for women. And Saturn is exalted in the 10th house. So now we have a Swa Venus with an exalted Saturn in the 10th house. That's a huge, improvement to the 10th house from it's like 9-day. Okay. And so again, they're choosing Venus, Saturn, Venus. Like clearly this was like a big, they're trying to clean up the reputation and healings here, in the first chart. And then we've got Mars. Okay, so now, so this is a little bit, so this is where we start getting problems again. Okay, so Mars is in the 8th house. Mars represents enemies. Mars is in the 8th house of long-term issues, problems. So Mars represents aggression. Mars represents military. Mars represents enemies. So, and look at this. It's like just about to cross K2. So we have a Mars K2 combination again. This is all happening in Leo. You see the little 5 there. That's a sign of Leo. And we've got Jupiter here. So, like the natal chart, we've got K2 with Mars and K2 with Jupiter again. So, and again, the 8th house is psychology. So this can be like a end, okay, to aggression and, deviousness of spirituality and that sort of thing. But the other thing is that you have a parivartana, exchange of houses between the Sun and Mars. Okay. So that means you can bring Sun into this 8th house. So that'll protect the 8th house to some degree of the inanimate things related to Sun. So Sun coming into its own sign in the 8th house is going to protect like longevity. It's going to give longevity because it's going to protect against death and chronic illness and stuff like that. But now you've got the 2 leadership planets, Mars and Sun, conjuncting, K2 and Jupiter as well. So leadership generally, military, you're kind of getting this like, K2 influence chart again. And the thing is, this represents the current sky pattern because literally Mars just crossed K2 a few days ago, and yesterday morning Mars moved out of Leo. And we had a parivartana, not with Mars and Sun, but we had a parivartana between Sun and Moon, because Moon was in Leo and Sun is in Cancer now. So actually, and is Jupiter, so we didn't have Jupiter in Leo, but we had, for like a day or two, we had like Sun, Mars, Moon, and K2 in Leo. And things kind of blew up because when Mars crosses K2, that creates like an explosive type of energy. And then Leo is a fixed fire sign. So constant activity. You have Sun there. So you have strange, actions, Mars related to Sun, government and leadership, administration. And Jupiter, spirituality. And Jupiter represents news, scandals, that kind of thing. Yeah. So, and again, sort of getting ahead a little bit, but basically, when Mars started going through the 7th house, where it's debilitated because Cancer is here in the 7th house, and Mars is debilitated in Cancer, and you have this massive Saturn of the Uttarashada piercing, victory, aspect in the seventh house of business partnerships, that's when things started heating up with Cambodia. And then also the PM, the Thailand PM was suspended by the courts. And then basically when Mars went into Leo here and crossed K2, that's almost exactly when things heated up, because things heated up between Cambodia and Thailand. They started bombing each other. I think it was July 24th. So right when Mars was crossing K2, which is going to bring explosive energy. And Mars represents enemies. And Mars in this chart is the lord of the fourth house of home. And it's in the lord of the eighth house, or not eighth house, 11th house of society. And they had to evacuate like over 100,000 people. I think 30 something people, 35 people or something died in that, just in the 10 days or whatever, with all the bombs and stuff like that. So you can see how this is like actually, working here. But so I was like, sort of like, oh man, like, I was like, man. So, I mean, luckily in some ways, Mars and K2 and Jupiter, Mars and K2 are in Purva Bhadrapada, not Purva Bhadrapada, Purva Falguni Nakshatra, and Jupiter's in Uttara Falguni Nakshatra, which are nicer in some ways. Like, easier than Mula. But Purva Falguni is related to like a marital bed, hammock, luxury items, high style living. And Uttar Falguni is related to that as well, but there's also this notion of like enjoyment, or no, like some sort of like a purpose related to the enjoyment and luxury living and stuff like that. So the thing though is what I'm seeing here is that unfortunately you're sort of dragging the sun, which is in a positive house, into the eighth house. And so now all your leadership, and again, spirituality as well, Jupiter's kind of a mixed bag here, being in the eighth house, because it's a natural benefic. So it should bring some spiritualization of this, and but also law, frankly. This could be like twisted laws and twisted politicians, frankly. But Jupiter is a pure temporal malefic in this chart, because Jupiter is lord of two negative houses, the third house and the 12th house. So actually, if you have a pure temporal malefic, you typically, one way to help that is to keep it in a negative house, so it doesn't bring that negative energy into the positive houses. But essentially what you're doing is you're bringing all the leadership, military leadership, government leadership, into this eighth house of long-term problems. There's some protection here, but this is going to be like scandals and fighting, nonstop fighting and aggression, um, over like luxury things. And also like the Mars at K2, again, that's kind of like that main chart where like you get this sort of unusual kind of lust or aggression type energy, you know, um, libido, like I was saying in the first one too. So yeah. So anyway, this birth dasha, 1932, Venus, Saturn, Venus, Mars. The current dasha is Mercury, Rahu, Mercury, Moon. So again, Mercury, you're going to be picking up this ninth house energy of government. And again, Mercury is nice because it's an Anurata. It's trying to build bridges, so that's nice. But again, it's the constellation there is Virgo, so there's going to be a duality there. And then Rahu is ambition. That's the second house. So there's going to be ambition in second house matters, which is family, assets, and also speech. And I mentioned before, when I see Rahu or Ketu in the second house, that can indicate speech that's it's not always like lying, but it can be sort of devious or misrepresentative. Like I've seen people when they have Rahu or Ketu in the second house, sometimes there are people who are kind of blowing themselves up more than they should, because they don't really have strong credentials. But I've seen it other ways too, where some people are very humble the way they speak, and you would never know that they're highly accomplished. So the speech, so there's like an incongruence, I would say, with speech and a person, or And then you're going to get all this aggressive energy there. So Mars is going to aspect the second house. Sun is going to aspect um, the second house. Jupiter as well. So you're going to get this sort of aggressive speech, that again is a little bit tempered by this Urva Falguni, Uttara Falguni energy. But there's a drive towards home. The moon is there in the fourth house, building bridges, but sort of like ambitious speech. There's a drive towards, again, assets and speech and stuff like that. So this might be a little bit more like, a little bit more of like blowing smoke, when somebody's talking. I don't know how solid this is. The other thing is that Lord of the second house is gone 12 houses away, so there's losses through speech. So this may be that it's hard to trust what government says. Yeah, leadership says. Okay, so then Lugna Nakshatra is Shravana. Shravana is about preservation and history, oral tradition. So again, there's like this still trying to maintain this oral tradition. And also Shravana is related to like the Vedas, like continuing, oral traditions such as astrology, Vedic astrology or Thai astrology or what have you. The moon is in Bharani. So this is like, the birth of women, birth of home. Also, there's like a nurturing, fostering energy with Barney. Not quite like Pusha, but there can be. Barney, again, the symbol of that is a womb. So again, I keep getting this like women nurturing energy. So there's trying to be, there's attempting to be some nurturing of home and also nurturing of tradition here. But the Lord again of this fourth house is Mars, gone into the eighth house with K2 and Sun and Jupiter. So there's issues there. Again, Mars, Moon is exaggerated because it's Digbal and it's Karkabhav and Asha simultaneously. So directional strength, but issues. And the Sun I mentioned is Jastas for the protection. So this chart is similar to the current sky pattern because Rahu is in Aquarius like it is now. Mars was in K2 in Leo as of until a few hours ago, yesterday. Saturn is in Pisces, and here Saturn is aspecting Pisces. Saturn is aspecting Venus, which it was up until a couple days ago, actually, because Saturn was aspecting Taurus and Venus was in. So actually, Saturn was aspecting a swa, Venus, for the last month or so. And then K2 Sun. Sun is not in Leo. It was in parivartana for a couple days, but Sun is coming into Leo mid-August. So this might be heating up, actually. It's coming in August 16th. And then there's a parivartana Sun. In this chart, it's Sun and Mars, but yesterday it was Sun and Moon. So that means more Sun energy, more leadership, high command issues and stories and things going on. So I'm just going to do a general review of this chart, and I'm going to talk about a few houses, but not all of them, because that seemed like way too much. And I know I already do a lot, so talk way too much about this stuff. But again, it's interesting, so that's why I do it. So anyway, the Lugna here, Capricorn or Makra, movable earth sign, so a lot of movement. I just posted the Capricorn video recently, and it's all about like building and endurance. So that's what they're really building up here. So we have a Swa, Bhavat, Bhavam, Lugnatia of Saturn. So that Lugnatia is the ruling planet of Saturn. So it's going to bring Saturn in its own sign, and the top here is going to bring strength and protection. And it's going to be like a rebuilding, kind of a building of self, building up of self, because the first house represents self. And it's an Uttarashad, so it's going to be building up like a kind of stronger foundation of victory. So again, I do see like that this help to some extent, ameliorate some of the problematic things that were going on in the original Bangkok chart. But this thing going on in the 8th house is I see as like another props, which is going to be tough because it's in a fixed sign, fixed fire sign here. So, um, yeah. So, strength, power, keep working. Yeah. And then through history, Shravan is all about like history and, again, protection in very practical, tangible ways. So we're not just like spiritualizing everything, but we want this to work in the real world. The only thing that was, as I mentioned in my Capricorn video, there's a lot of vata or wind associated with Capricorn and the planet Saturn. And with Saturn in Capricorn like this and nothing else touching the Lugna here, this could be like a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, because vata, translated loosely as wind, comes from Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine. So there can this like if this is a person, this is somebody who'd be like kind of a workaholic based on fear, not confidence, I would say. There is some confidence here because Mars is aspecting the 3rd house, but as a general kind of personality, would be more like a protective, precious type of vibe here going on. So the yogas in this chart, there are a bunch. There's a Shasha yoga and Malavya yoga, two Panchamahapurush yogas. That's the Venus in its own sign, Saturn in its own sign. Those are going to bring power, endurance, creativity. There's a Parvata yoga. So the Saturn in its own sign can bring wealth, happiness, rulership, and then doing acts of service, doing acts that are of lasting benefit to others. So that's nice. Then we have a Kala Sarpa yoga. That's going to bring ambition here, but also like this unusual, unexpected energy, kind of like in the first chart we had the eclipse, solar eclipse energy. Then we have a Sun, Mars, parivartana, which I've been talking about. So we're going to have Sun and Mars all over this chart, the two leadership fiery planets. That's going to be intense, in a different way than the first chart, but strength, protection, leadership, of long-term issues, society. We also have a budhaditya yoga here. So intelligence, the sun and Mercury together aspect in the 5th house. That's going to be kind of nice. So again, it's going to be more of a tempered, rational, longevity type of vibe, at least some of this chart. Again, under the hood of the car, though, we've got this Mars, K2, Sun, and Jupiter in the 8th house, which is kind of wild times down there. And the 8th house, sometimes we talk about the 8th house being sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So we're still getting some of that, but it's sort of like, instead of being like all over the chart, it's kind of like more contained to the 8th house. Yeah. Then we have Shubha Vashi, solar yoga. That was same in the main chart as strong Venus, 12 house from the sun. It brings renown, dear to all, riches, that sort of thing. We do have a Kuja dosha, mangalik, again, trouble with relationships. And we do have kind of a Virenchi yoga as well, because the 5th lord is Venus, and that's Swa. And then Saturn is Swa. Jupiter is not strong, but it's with a strong dispositor. So that kind of brings, so again, except for that piece of Jupiter, it's Virenchi-like. It may not be a full Virenchi, but there's still going to be strength coming from that. And Virenchi yoga brings like knowledge and the sweet disposition and nobility as well. So, chidra grahas, or points of vulnerability in this chart, are Venus, Saturn, Mars, Moon. So again, and the thing is, Venus, Saturn, and Mars are all in the birth dasha. So there were vulnerability. So the birth dasha was running all these vulnerability planets, which is like, wow, okay. So this was like a tough time when this popped up. And Venus and Moon, again, women. So from there, Venus and Moon, arts, creativity, emotions. Saturn and Mars represent home, or not, Moon represents home, but Saturn and Mars represent land, fighting. Mars and Saturn represent like, you know, manufacturing, potentially, military as well. And then Venus and Moon those are both aspecting the 4th house of home and the 10th house of work and reputation. So, it's still a little bit fragile here in the beginning, especially, and when you run these planets. Then the yogi for wealth is Mercury. So again, building bridges, businesses. Also, Mercury represents business, friends, speech, governments here because it's Lord of the 9th house. Yogi's Mars. So again, there's going to be losses of wealth through Mars. And again, Mars represents fighting, enemies, military, rebelliousness, that sort of thing. The duplicate, and also like when Mars is Rahu and Ketu, this can be like a obsessive, compulsive, erratic, addictive type energy. So yeah, this 8th house is a little troublesome, I would say. And then the thing is, like, because Mars is in parivartana with Sun, you're going to bring this 8th house energy to the the 11th house here of society. So sort of cleaning it up, but not completely. Still have strong creativity, but with boundaries, clear boundaries here. Then the duplicate yogi is Jupiter. So Jupiter represents education, spirituality, but it's down here in the 8th house, with all these malefics. So there's still going to be trouble, I think, with those things. Yeah. Then a few more notes on the next slide here. So again, specifically looking at leadership, the parts of the chart related to leadership. So everything on the left is the same. On the right are my notes related to leadership. So again, first thing I would focus on is the 9th house, the house and the Lord. So there's nothing aspecting that house, but the Lord is a retrograde Mercury in Anurata, which is pretty nice. The other thing is, the only thing though is Mercury's Bhavat Bhavam, and Mercury's the Lord of the 6th house, and it's gone 6th away. So that means that there's going to be like one problem after another, or potentially one debt after another, social debt going on here. So, but through building bridges, there's still this is more positive than that, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mula 9th house that we had for the original chart. Building in practical ways. This can be alliances on both sides. So, this, unfortunately, since it's Virgo, there can be this like cleaning up organization energy, which is nice rather than being so like wild, like the first chart. But, what was I going to say? That it could also, but it's still dual, so you can play both sides of the fence here, or both teams. Swing for both teams depending on the day or the mood or something. So, and the was it 9th Lord has gone to the 11th house, which is about enjoyment. It's a kamasthana, society, income. Sun is there in Jason, so protecting society. Those are pretty nice things. But then Mars is there as well. So we're bringing again this 8th house energy to the 11th house. And Mars will protect to some degree 11th house matters, but more income rather than people. So inanimate things. And then it's, Scorpio is there. It's an emotional sign. It's also a fixed water sign. So this is going to be unusual long-term problems associated with clubs, group society, and leadership. And it also, again, because it's not only is the 8th house a fixed fire sign, but the 11th house where the sun is, and again, there's a strong relationship between the 11th house and the 8th house. It's going to be hard to ameliorate whatever. This is like, it's almost like it works both ways. Like this is trying to create more structure and straightforwardness, but it also creates this kind of chart creates a lot of rigidity because everything related to leadership is happening in fixed signs. So that was, yeah. So in the 5th house, because you have Sun and Mercury aspecting a 5th house, again, Sun leadership, and this is intellect. And the Lord of the 5th house is a suave Venus, which is pretty nice. The only thing though is Venus is in Vishaka, which is victory at all costs. So there's always this aggressive energy associated with Vishaka. Luckily, Venus is there, and Venus can represent diplomacy, but it's like diplomacy at all costs. Like, probably you might give in too much or sometimes push too hard. You might not get the right ideal balance there. But luckily, Venus will bring more of that good energy out of Vishaka, but Vishaka is still like victory at all costs. And then Mercury's aspecting there, so building bridges. Sun is there just protection, but you're also going to get this Mars. So you're going to get Sun and Mars, the two fiery planets in the fifth house. So that's still a lot of fire, military, angry governments or aggressive governments, leadership, that sort of thing. But it is Taurus in the fifth house, so practical, steady victory, but at all costs, diplomacy, social grace. And again, the fifth house of intellect is a fixed earth sign. So, you're fixing the lugna here of personality. The fifth house is a natural fixed house of intellect. The eighth house is a natural fixed house of deep psychology. And then the 11th house is a fixed water sign of society. It might be that we almost sort of try to fix and pin this thing down too much in a way. Yeah, so then the eighth house we've been talking about. So Mars is crossing K2, and then you have Swa's Sun through parivartana with Jupiter. The other thing is because the leadership planets are here, this could be like, and it's a fixed fire sign with two fire. This could be like constant, unusual leadership scandals, even assassination. I mean, God forbid, but maybe death in law. And again, lifestyle stuff because we've got enjoyment here. So this is like potentially leaders who are pilfering, from society, from the uh, public coffers, that sort of thing. Sex, drugs, unstable spirituality, and this is happening in a high level because it's Leo. Leo is a high level, upper echelon of administration, involving also affecting aggression as well, because this Mars KT Sun is going to be a lot of aggression, and it's aspecting in the second house of speech. It's also in the family's inner circle, but also the third house of neighbors. So yeah, but there will be some. So it's kind of wild. It seemed like the way that these astrologers were thinking was that like the parivartanas were going to protect. But again, from what I've learned, it doesn't really always happen that way. In some ways it does, but like with Mars crossing through Leo here, that's when all the bombings start happening with neighbors, which you would expect. So that even though in the Parivartana was going on, literally, so it was all happening, the protection was there. So maybe it's like it could have been worse, but it still happened. So there's still this aggression, like, and again, like weird aggression that they can't figure out who even started the whole thing happened. And I would expect that, through a chart like that. This, then the second house, we have a Rahu there because Rahu's in its own star. So again, a lot of ambition, aspected by Mars, Jupiter, Sun. Ambitious, but potentially deceptive speech regarding the stuff above, because again, Sun and Mars. I'm just looking at where Sun and Mars are. Sun and Mars, because we're looking at leadership, and those two leadership planets, like they're together in the second house, fifth house, eighth house, 11th house. A drive towards, securing tangible assets, families, technology, land. Again, this Mars and Rahu is kind of like that Mars aspected by K2 in the first. So again, libido as well. So we're not completely dismissing, the Las Vegas, entertainments, industry, economy, that has supported Thailand. But again, the second house is a fixed air sign. So again, the place where these leadership planets are all in fixed signs. So uh, it's again maybe potentially concretizing things that won't work as well as the things that are probably better than the for sure. Okay. So what else is going on? So Mercury, oh, this is also interesting. So Mercury, even though that seems pretty cool, it's great. It's an honorata, yay, like leadership or victory through alliances. Mercury is in the star of Saturn, which are a shot of the sharp piercing victory. So that can give more of an edge and endurance and like push, like a bit of aggression, that way. And then Sun is in the star of Mercury. So Sun is in the star of Mercury, Mercury is in the star of Saturn. So you can see it's like those, the Russian dolls. It's like it kind of comes back to the Saturn energy, which is pretty hardcore. Capricorns are pretty hardcore because they don't quit, especially with Saturn there, even stronger. Um, and then Mars is in a star of Venus, which is Swa, but it's in Vishaka again. So again, we keep like Mars leads us back to uh, like this Vishaka energy. So even though it's a Swa Venus, which again probably takes the edge off, and it could be worse for sure, you still got this Mars K2 Sun lineup, which is pretty intense. And again, Vishaka victory at all costs, and Saturn like piercing victory. Like, so at least there's some level in there of the honorata, but again, like it's all like victory, victory, victory. But it's like I don't know. It seems I don't know. It is what it is. I mean, when I do muhurta charts, auspicious timing charts, it's hard. It's really hard. Like even when you have months to, pick a date or a time, you're like, oh my God, this looks great, but then this looks, like a disaster and da 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 da. I mean, it's hard doing that kind of muhurta work. I know I've tried. Um, so anyway, what does this give? Like this first constitution of Thailand, what does it give? Well, there's still going to be an unpredictable element here of leadership specifically, because this K2 is still with Mars and Sun. I mean, that's the bottom line for me. I was hoping that would be cleared up, but it's not. And there's still like an aggressive energy here. Trouble with neighbors and women, still that's the same. And again, it's going to be hard to change this because now everything's in a fixed sign. Um, so maybe that makes it a little more predictable. But there may be more diplomacy here because Venus is small and a positive sign now in the 10th house of daily action. There's still an edge to it because it's in Vishaka, but Anurada is now here. I mean, that's definitely better for the 9th house than Mula, a double Mula combination. So some attempt to build alliances, and maybe that's why, like yesterday, it was interesting. Exactly right when Mars exited Leo is when Thailand and Cambodia called a ceasefire. So I was like, oh, see, Mars has moved out of this fixed fire sign with K2. And it can like go into, not Gemini, Virgo, where it's all about building alliances now. So we've moved from aggression land to, let's try to work this out. So there you go. But also, again, this massive Saturn in Capricorn, it just seems like there might be quite a bit of vata or fear, anxiety here. Yeah. And so, again, this from May to July 2025, Thailand, Cambodia, they had this skirmish going on in what's called the Emerald Triangle, which is there was some land dispute or something going on there, or boundary dispute, something. Reciprocal fire, including bombing. They both recalled their diplomats from their countries. And then this also involved a scandal with the Thailand PM, which I didn't. I knew that there was like a phone call, but then I was reading about the details. I was like, well, that's kind of twisted. Apparently, the Thailand prime minister called the father of the Cambodian prime minister, who used to be the leader of the country, and she was criticizing the Thailand military to the father of the leader of the other country, which seems very strange to me. But that's exactly what you would get with this Mars in K2 and Sun. You're going to have like this weird, strange actions coming from leadership, So even though the Mercury is an honorata, Mercury again is with Sun and Mars. You're bringing this 8th house energy to Mercury. So at first glance, it looks like Mercury is going to be all about building bridges, but you've still got this K2 K2 embedded Mars on Mercury, and Sun is going back and forth into this 8th house as well. So even though Mercury's looking kind of good because it's Anurata, it's still sandwiched in between these planets related to the 8th house and K2. So it's indirect, but you're still getting K2 related to the 9th house. Get it? So it's more indirect, but you're still, so it's sort of, I mean, again, at least you're getting the layer of Anurata now. I mean, that's better. But still, there's a lot of K2 here. Then what do we have? The 3rd house. Oh, and so I just said the 3rd house is going to be, again, neighbors. So this is the skirmishes that are going on with Cambodia. Is Mars, and I talked about when Mars went through the 7th house, that's when you started getting firing and the scandal with the PM. And then with the 8th house, like it was like dropping bombs. And then now that Mars has moved into the 9th house, it's like, okay, let's talk ceasefire now. And simultaneously, yesterday, what happened was that there was a gunman that opened fire in a common market, like a shopping market, and killed a bunch of people, a few people. And that would be this Mars crossing K2 aspecting the 11th house. So you're going to get like all this fire energy in the 11th house of clubs, group, society. So yeah, so you can see how this Mars crossing K2 played out for Thailand, both with skirmish with Cambodia, and then the scandal with the PM, Prime Minister, and then the shootout in a market. Because yeah, so there you go. So again, I do think this is better, but actually a lot of it's still kind of the same too. So step by step, though. I mean, if you change it too much, like you might get to completely uproot the country and tradition. So one step at a time, I guess. So, sorry. So I did look at sorry, I forgot I did this part. So I did look at the auspicious subzodiacs for the Constitution chart, just to compare again the Dashamsha D10 for Korean reputation versus the Ekadamsha D11. And based on this, I don't think the astrologers from 1932 were using Amsha analysis. But we'll look at it. So, but so it's just FYI for those of us who are interested in historical astrology. But so the birth dasha was Venus, Saturn, Venus, Mars, and I circled those planets, and I circled all of them in blue, so we know which of those planets. There wasn't really any overlap except for, was there any? No, there was no overlap between these birth dashas. So that's why I circled the birth dasha planets in blue, and then the current dasha planets in orange, so we could see what was active then versus now. So in the D10, Saturn, which was previous dasha, and Mercury, Moon for the current dasha are not well placed. And look, they're all in the 8th house of scandals, and there's a parivartana here, I think, right? Yeah, there's a parivartana between Mars and Saturn. So you're bringing this really, you're going to bring protection to the 8th house. But again, this Mars and Saturn, this is going to be, military and aggressive energy, transformative energy here. Venus is Swa again. That's nice. So that's going to be nice for this birth dasha. It is with a soul enemy, Jupiter, and it's in a pop Sankhya yoga because of Sun. That's going to bring Venus down a bit, and there's still going to be issues fighting. And then with all these planets in the 8th house, all these planets are going to be aspecting Venus. So you're going to have 2 malefics and 3 benefics, but a soul enemy. And then there's soul enemies with Mars, Venus, Mercury. Was it Mars, Mercury, Moon? They're actually all of them, because you go Saturn, the soul enemy lineup is Saturn, then Mars, then Mercury, then Moon. Oh no, it's the other way around. Sorry. Mars, Mercury, Moon, skip Sun. Okay, and then you have Sun. Sorry, let me do it again. So Mars is Mercury, Moon, skip Sun, and it goes Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, Rahu. Yeah, so these are all soul enemies here. I mean, this is kind of crazy, this whole lineup here. But you can see there's all this energy in the second house and the eighth house, kind of like the main chart. So this will bring strong finance and diplomacy, but a lot of, fighting here. And we also have a Balarishta yoga again, fragile beginning, Mars and Saturn, parivartana. So there will be some protection. There might also be like strong, like manufacturing, engineering, military of society going on here. So there's going to be long-term issues, but also changes, especially now because we're running Mercury and Moon. Those are in the eighth house of scandals. And Rahu is the fifth house of, counseling. It's also the fifth house is also the like a platform. So like and Rahu is like video and internet. So this is like internet, news about scandals and stuff like that. Um, yeah. So and then loss of a leader. Yeah. So where is it? Yeah. So then the Ekadamsha. So again, it doesn't, right now, the D10 is not strong for the first constitution chart. Originally, Venus and Mars were kind of well placed. And again, see, they're doing a parivartana again. I think that, like back then, it seems like if they did a parivartana, they thought they would protect things completely. But again, it doesn't protect. That's what I learned. It doesn't protect people, and that looks like what's going on here currently with Thailand in the news. So then the Ekadamsha D11 income public support elections. So in the Bertasha, Saturn and Mars are not well placed, but Venus is okay. It's in a positive house. It's not super strong. There is a parivartana, though, between Sun and Moon. So that's going to make the landlord of Venus stronger. And then there's a parivartana exchange of houses between Mercury and Jupiter. So that's going to make them stronger. So the Bertasha was probably not very strong for elections because I don't think it was based. I don't think it was based on elections. Maybe it was. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. I don't know. But like everything that's going on now is going to be more beneficial for society and gain public support because all the orange planets for the current dasha are in positive houses, so it's going to be better. Yeah, so there's some protection with Venus, Sun, Moon, Jupiter, Parker. So protection, emotional protection of public and leaders. So again, there's some more protection energy of the public rather than this like, public enemy type of energy that was in the original Bangkok chart. There's going to be stronger education, stronger analysis, thoughtfulness, news, publication advice. So it's not going to be like this devious leader, stringing people along or creating this smoke and mirrors image of what he's really about, through convoluted spirituality. There's going to be much more information, public information, and that sort of thing. So, based on this, I don't think they used Amsha analysis, and it does seem like they like to use parivartanas a lot for protection. But again, I'm not sure it's worked. Again, maybe it's better than nothing. Better some protection than none at all. But it seems like even in the first Constitution chart that there's still issues. And again, that's why there's been like 20 constitutions. That was just the first one. So again, there's that, that's that Mercury and Anurata, sandwiched in between Sun and Mars revolving back to the eighth house, So, yeah. So anywho, there you go. So yeah, so thanks for hanging out with me, listening to astrology of Bangkok and Thailand, historically and currently. Appreciate all your support for my work in the channel, so thanks for that. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. For more famous birth charts, famous places, people, places, and moments in time, I would check out my birth charts archive list 2025 video where I list all the famous charts I've looked at and the videos you can find them in. I do offer individual birth chart readings. If that's interesting to you, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info. And then I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about things like Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, yoga, homeopathy, and naturopathic medicine. And the name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too for you. All right, so as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so take good care. Namaste.